I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Erin Browning, and we connected actually a couple months ago, and we've been working on a schedule so that we could record, because I think that she has a story that a lot of people, unfortunately, and in some cases, fortunately, can connect with. So thank you for being here, Erin.
Thank you for having me, Matt. I'm really grateful to be here and to be able to just share my story with other people and make a difference in that way. So thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. That's what I love about the Life Shift podcast. I actually got a message the other day from a friend of mine who said, I swear, I connect with every story that's being shared on your podcast. And what's funny about that is that every story is like really different, right? But there are so many commonalities that we as humans experience, whether it's through loss or whether it's through a celebration of something or changing a job or whatever it may be. And so I love that, people are so willing to share vulnerability and their story and kind of the growth that comes from it. So it's really fun process.
It is fun, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Since I like to go into these, as authentically as possible, perhaps you can paint the picture of Erin before this pivotal moment that we're going to talk about, kind of what your day-to-day, who you were, what you were doing, what life looked like for you, so that we can have a good understanding.
Let me think about a timeline and a good logical starting point. So probably 7 or so years ago, I had a divorce. At that point, after the divorce, I was in a relationship with a man. I had a stepson. So we had a pretty stable, steady, traditional, I guess, home life. My education is as a speech language pathologist, and I worked in a hospital. So I would go to work every day. I would see clients who could not communicate properly. Most of my clients don't have proper voicing or swallowing. So you do a lot of work on breathing, voicing, and I would go to a hospital every single day, come home, cook dinner, take the kid to ski races, standard, very standard life. That's what life looked like. And let me say, I had come from something not so wonderful. I had had a not so great marriage that I was in for a good while. And so when I found my significant other, Dave, it was just love. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. And I found a sense of family that I really had not had in my adult life with him and his son. Very stable.
Yeah, you found something that was completely different than what you had experienced, and maybe something when you were in that previous space that you couldn't actually imagine.
Yes. And this is not even where the shift happens, right?
Yeah.
So I had like this not so great space and then this really beautiful, magical space. And again, it was very stable. Like, I think that was one of the pieces. There are pieces of being a step parent that are chaotic just inherently, and raising a teenage boy that are inherently chaotic. However, in comparison to like the grand scheme of life, I had a really lovely, easy, beautiful life. We were very active. We loved to travel. We loved to listen to live music. We spent a lot of time at ski resorts. We loved to be out on the boat. Just a pretty fun time. And so that was really good. And I had no concept of what it would be like not to have that in my world. It never entered my imagination that this life, this beautiful life I had created, could potentially go away. So we had this beautiful love story. And then we had a normal evening. We had a normal night. Dave was 55 years old. We had Mexican food, margaritas, lots of fun. his child was on vacation with his mother. It was actually December 7th, which is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. So all this destruction, and I didn't know that. He told me about that night, though. And so we had this beautiful, fun evening, and then we came home, and he had a heart attack, massive heart attack. Everything seemed normal. In hindsight, there might have been some indications, but in that episode, I had no idea. So he has this massive heart attack, and within an instant, he was dead.
Oh, wow. And that idyllic life that you had been in as a part of that felt just like so fitting suddenly was over in a matter of moments.
Yeah, it was gone.
And it's like, and I think a lot of people can relate to situations in which there's this like massive moment in which everything you knew is now like, it doesn't matter. Like it's changed forever.
A huge changing moment. And so it was interesting in that moment. So hopefully this isn't too much, but I'll give some more details about the evening. So I had gone to bed. We had both gone to bed, actually. He went to bed before me, and he actually asked for antacids at one point, which is like classic heart attack,
Oh,
that you
really?
have indigestion. Yeah, it's a classic indicator, especially for a man, that indigestion is an indication you might be having a heart attack. He had, we had just eaten fajitas and
Right.
margaritas. And
Right.
it's like, yeah. So I asked him more than once, though, are you okay? Are you sure you're okay?
Because this was out of the norm for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. So we went to bed, and he said to me when we went to bed, if I can't get comfortable because I've got this indigestion, I may go lie down on the couch and watch television so I don't keep you awake. So like 30, 40 minutes later, I woke up and I heard a really loud noise, and I immediately went in the living room, and I walked over to him, and he was taking his last breath.
Oh, wow.
And so I went through all the motions, like drug him into the floor. And I'll give a little context. I am 5'2", stretching it, 125 pounds. Yeah, 125 pounds. And he was like 6'3", a huge, big man. So I'm like not even thinking, I know CPR. I've worked in a hospital, but I had to like get him in the floor and go through all those motions, call 911. So I did all of those things, but I knew instantly the outcome was not going to be what I wanted it to be. I knew it.
Do you think you knew that from your hospital experience, or just the sense that you had kind of the whole night as you were asking them these questions? Do you feel like you had that intuition earlier too when you were asking him?
Yes, 100%. And I can tell you there were several moments throughout the night that I think we both knew. It was the whole night was very sacred, and it was like we lived lifetimes in 6 hours. We talked about death. We talked about just heavy, important things in that time frame. And I think he knew and just wanted to be present instead of being worried and scrambling. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so fascinating too, because you think like, I mean, looking back, you're like, I could have done X, Y, and Z, but in the moment you're like, this is all I ever wanted, right? These are the conversations that make those connections of people. And you might get into this, but do you feel, I don't know if guilt is the right word, but do you feel a sense of like, I wish I had done something, or I wish there was something I could have done in that moment?
Okay, so early on in grief, I had no guilt, none. Like probably the first 3 months, I was in a cocoon. I was in this like protected cocoon.
Yeah. What was that like? Like that cocoon?
It was very strange because on one hand, I was deeply, deeply sad, but on another level, I felt so connected and present with him. It was like I still was just connected to him. And I didn't have any of that guilt at
That's a
all in the
protection.
beginning.
Yeah, that cocoon is
Yeah.
like disbelief, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we can only handle as humans, we can only handle so much of that tragedy at once, so it comes to us in, like, titrated amounts
Yes.
so that we can heal from it. It's interesting that night, so I knew he was dying, and I called 911, and they came very quickly
Right.
and started doing their job, and I kind of stepped back, and I was standing, like, behind a couch, and he was in the floor in front of the couch, and I looked, and there was a key moment where I just said to myself, "Oh my gosh, I have to let go." Like, I just knew it. Instantly, I knew it, and I started, and I'm not a praying really kind of girl, I guess. Like, I'm not, a devout Christian or anything, like that. I live heart-centered, though, and I just started saying, "Whatever is in the highest, whatever is in the highest." And then I was like, "Why am I saying that? Shouldn't I be saying live, live?"
Right. But you knew.
I knew. I absolutely knew, like, I had to just let go. And so it was very interesting, like, this dynamic, and that's not my personality. So, like, Erin in that life before, I
Right.
had a plan, I had a
Hmm.
schedule. I was very type A. I'm a hyperachiever. I had a master's degree when I was 22 years old. Like, just I did all the things very quickly and expediently and in my control. And in that instant, I knew that was no longer possible.
As you were watching the last
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah, of him die.
Yeah. I'm the same way. And in the sense of, or I was, I still am, but there's a lot of control that I like to have. But in these big moments, I've also experienced like a sudden death in my life that really changed things. Kind of the reason the Life Shift podcast exists. And then I watched someone I love dearly slowly die. And I can relate to that letting go feeling. And I would imagine that it's hard to say. Is that hard to admit that you were like, okay,
Oh, yes.
right? Because
Yes.
like you said, you're like, I should be saying live, like do everything you can. But then you're like, no, it's time. I
Right.
feel it. Do you think that's because of
Yeah,
the connection that you had to Dave?
I do. I do think that was our connection, and he even laid groundwork that night. So I will tell you another little story of that night. When we were at dinner, he said, "I need to talk to you about something." And I went, "Okay."
That's the
And he said,
worst.
"You've got it." Right? And he was like, "I just need you to understand me and hear me. You have to stop trying to fix things." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I mean, Erin," he was like, "you scramble around this house and like, I can't find the proper ski socks." And you're like, "Let me go find them." And he's like, "If the kid forgets his lunch, you're immediately making him another lunch and trying to fix everything." He said, "You have to stop this. It's not good for you." So I thought, okay. And I just like listened to him. Okay, sure. And then we came home and we were watching television and he squeezed my leg a little too hard. And I looked over at him and I said, "Are you sure you're okay?"
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, I think it was pain. I think he
Mm.
may have been having some chest pains and he squeezed my leg. And when I said, "Are you sure you're okay?" he looked at me and he said, "Love, it's fine. And even if it's not yours to fix."
Wow. It's so
Yeah.
interesting. Like all the signs, right? And so that night you had all these little like you said, he knew something was up
Yeah.
and that he wanted you to know that you were going to be okay and that this was not your situation to kind of figure out for him.
Right. And 6 weeks before he died, we had a whole conversation where he told me, "I'm an old man, I'm gonna die before you, and you have to get on with your life. Do not stay in this house and write all day long. Do not turn into a hermit and read books all day long. He knew my tendencies. You have to live your life. You have to find love again. You have to live.
Right. And so when he passed, you took 3 months to do the things that he told you not to do, but probably the
Yeah.
things that you knew you needed to do to protect
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I clung so hard for those first 3 months. I just clung on to everything familiar. I tried to get his son to continue to stay with me. I drove his son to, like, his job at the ski resort every weekend, which was bizarre. I mean, this is a 16-year-old kid, and I'm not even legally his stepmother. I mean, he will call me his stepmother, and I call him my stepson, but I just wanted everything to be the same.
Right. And that Dave was on a trip or something. Like he just was
Right.
not in the house, but
Yeah.
he'll be back.
Right. So that wasn't working. And then I went on a short vacation. I went to Florida. I had a great friend who called me within a week, and she said, "When you're ready to go somewhere warm, tell me and I'll take you." So he died in December. We went to Florida in February, and it was a wonderful gift. I did not want to go. I was having massive anxiety about leaving, didn't want to go, didn't want to go. And I told her on that trip, however, I said, I can't live here again next winter. I will not be in West Virginia next winter. I cannot do it. And I said, I would love to figure out how can I live in a little beach town, even if it's just for a couple months. Like, how do I make this happen in my life? So I told her these things. And none of that came to fruition, though, until many, many months later. And I wasn't even actively thinking about doing it, but it happened.
What do you think do you think there was a moment in which you were ready to kind of take those little steps and like admit that it was time to go on that vacation? Was there something that was like, okay, you had your time?
Uh, that's a good question. So I felt like I was just kind of festering where I was, and I was so cold, chilled to the bone cold. And
Sometimes that'll do it.
yeah, I was just so cold. I was taking baths like 3 times a day, just taking hot baths. I was walking miles and miles and miles. I would like bundle up in all my snow gear and just run and walk to try to warm myself up.
Mm. Were you still working at the time?
Yeah, I
After?
went back to work like a week after he died because it was a pandemic, and my colleague she got COVID. There was no one else to do the job, and it was right before the holidays. So I just went back to work. But I was only working part-time. So it wasn't a full-time thing.
Do you think going back was helpful or harmful for your journey afterwards?
I think it was helpful. There was a piece of it where it was almost like you have to get back on the horse, right? So within a couple of months, I had to do CPR training at work. Would they make us do like these quarterly modules? And I don't know if you've done this
I have.
recently, but these mannequins tell you like you're not compressing hard enough, and how many the percentage. And it was maddening to me because I was like, oh my God, it's that 7%, that I didn't compress hard enough,
Right.
or I kept trying to dissect this. And I was actually in therapy, and my therapist said, "Why can't you just like talk to them? I'll write you an excuse. Like, you don't need to do that again." And I said, "No, I think I do." So there's a piece of me, my personality and who I am at my core, that I'm more of like a get in it kind of girl, you know?
Which is interesting because you also said that you were cocooning for a while too. So it's like you had these two parts of you competing. And the reason I asked that original question about was it harmful or not, because of what you said about that whole like I just wanted everything to be the same. And so part of me thinks, well, is going back to the same prolonging, that space?
Yeah, possibly, but I believe that grief is similar to life in that time lets it evolve, right? So, it, just this past week, this past Tuesday was the 1.5 year marker of Dave's death. And it was amazing how much more peaceful I was from even the 1 year marker. So I kind of went back through that in my mind and thought time just does a really great job of helping us. So I think that it could be helpful for some people and harmful for some people to go back into what was normal. I think it's fair, but I think what actually happens is you're eventually going to encounter it. So
Hmm.
you can encounter it all at once,
Right.
you
You mean
know?
grief?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it keeps coming.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
for
not
sure.
like, yeah, I don't think you can go like into the grief bubble and then move into the life bubble. That's what I thought. I
That's what you
wanted that.
thought. Yeah. And
I wanted
honestly,
that for myself.
from my experiences, and I've said this on my episode, and I said it in our little bonus episode, the first one that we did, but so I was 8 when my mom died. And so when she died, my father lived in another state. So everything about I could not resume life like it was the day before, right? Like new school, new place to live, new state, new accents, new everything, right? And then it took me, to your point of you just can't go back. It took me about 20 years or so to like fully grieve my mom. And it
Yeah.
was a lot of, pushing it back, pretending things, performative for the people around me. A lot of it wasn't really for me. It didn't serve me well. But once I got through it, it actually helped me do what you said you wish you could have done, right? When my grandmother got really sick and was passing, I was able to have a very similar evening that you had with Dave, where you were talking about all the big important things and kind of almost closing the door, wrapping a little button of
Yeah.
like, these are all the things we needed to say. And I was able to do that with my grandmother. But when she finally passed, I felt that I quit everything for a moment. I took some leave from work and all these things, but I was able to process everything really quickly and then get to a new version of my life very quickly. So I think it's really interesting hearing other people's grief stories because there's common pieces, but everyone's is so different. And the key thing that you said, I think, is the time aspect, right? There's no predetermined, like at 3 months, you do this.
Right. So when early on I started lurking around on in these widow groups because I wasn't legally a widow, so I didn't feel like I could say I was a widow. I've learned differently since that that's kind of garbage, and anybody who's a widow will say you're a widow too, right? If you want to have that label. But early on, I kept reading year two is harder than year one. And I thought, no way, absolutely not.
This
This
is not
cannot be
happening.
the case. This is not real. So, kind of like as the shift occurred in my life, what happened was so the first 3 months I was in a cocoon, and then I started like maneuvering out of that a bit and knowing I needed to do something more, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I was just so confused. I needed to do something different, didn't know what. So I started doing like buying a bunch of clothes and
Retail therapy.
styling my hair. Yes, styling my hair differently. And then I got on the dating apps. Like 6 months, I woke up and I was like, I'm not dead.
Yes.
What just
Yeah.
happened here?
Right. And he
And so I
wanted
got
you to
on.
date.
He did. I don't know if he wanted me to get on Tinder because that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
If you've never been on Tinder as a 42-year-old, it was a whole new world out there.
Hey, you were trying new
um,
things.
I was trying new things, and then I thought I had a plan in mind of where I was going to go and live, and it didn't work out. None of that worked out the way I thought it would, and I felt a bit shaken. But within a week, I like reconfigured plans and I said, this is what I'm doing. And I booked a writer residency in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I traveled with a dear friend of mine to the Southwest for the winter. And then I thought I was just going to quit my job as a speech pathologist. And I have been doing breath work and Ayurvedic health counseling too. I did both things kind of part time. And I thought I'm just going to quit the speech stuff and go all in with the breathing and Ayurveda. Although that takes a lot more emotional energy to support people in that way for me. So I went to my employer and I said, I'm out. Not doing it. I'm
Yeah.
quitting. And they were like, "What? Why don't you just do telehealth?" Like, you did that during the pandemic, and we don't really want to lose you. We feel like you do great work here. You've got a strong foothold in your career. Why are you throwing it
Right.
all away? And I said, "Oh, maybe I will." So it afforded me the ability to live kind of as a digital nomad
Yeah.
for almost a year, and I've traveled wherever I really wanted to. I mean, I had to jump through a few hoops with licensure, but I've lived all over and still been of service, done good work. Yeah, in a way that I didn't have to burn it all down. And I will tell you, burning it all down is my tendency. I mean, I really actually burned furniture. I burned clothing.
Like literal burning. We're not talking metaphor here.
No, literal burning. I had never done the literal burning until I've always been a burn it down metaphorically
Yeah.
kind of gal. But then when I was leaving West Virginia, there were certain things that I didn't know what to do with. So I got rid of all my possessions, except for what fit in my car. And I sent 6 boxes to my parents' house that had like, random things in it, art that I didn't want to get rid of, that kind of thing. But like I had this coat, this winter coat that was Dave's, and I had worn that dirty coat around all winter long. But I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to give it to anybody else. And I was tired of wearing the dirty coat. So I burned it.
Yeah. You were shedding.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a very interesting, like another major shift.
Well, it's interesting too because it feels like the moment of I feel like your shift is not necessarily, bear with me, is not necessarily Dave dying, but rather the moment in which you said, let it go, give it
Yes.
over. I feel like
Yeah.
that's your moment because it allowed you, instead of performing to what society always told you needed to do to be successful or to have a successful relationship or fix everyone, whatever those things were telling you to do, now you were able to eventually curate and focus on the things that you maybe are drawn to or most passionate about.
Yeah, it's great. So, yes, it is. So, the work as a speech pathologist and the breath work go hand in hand. I've done talking keynotes courses for many years as a professional. And so that kind of has molded itself into what I'm doing now. And I have enough time to write, and I'm writing. So all of those are really great things that would have never come about had I not let go of this idea of this is how it's supposed to be, or this is the only way that I'm going to be able to do it. I mean, for a long time, I thought I was so angry because he didn't have his paperwork together, right? So he didn't have his estate settled, and I didn't get anything. So people think, oh, you got a big insurance policy and now you're just traveling. No,
Right. No,
no.
you're creating
In
this.
fact, what happened, I lost a partner and somebody who helped with half of my expenses. So no, I've created it out of necessity, I think, but really it's kind of been a beautiful gift for me to feel, I guess, more empowered that I
Right.
can do it. Yeah.
What's driving you now to choose the new projects, to choose like what you do next or where you go? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so it's a highly intuitive. Everything I do is intuitive right now.
Which is different than previous version of Erin, right?
Yeah. Yeah, very different. I always felt like somewhat committed to a decision, like, well, I said I was going to do this and now I need to do this. And
Me too.
and now I'm like, oh, this isn't working, so I'm going to do it differently.
Without burning it all down.
without burning it all down. Yeah. Without burning it all down. I'm able to like keep the bits that work, get rid of the things that don't. And so what happened, I had to get so simple. In fact, I should get the list and actually read you my list. So in the beginning of this, like in that 3-month window, it was so simple that my therapist would say to me, have you eaten food today?
Mm.
Have you, drank water today? Very, very simple. I had people in my world who were really just angels that helped me function. And I thought I had come out of that. And then I was traveling and I ended up in Portland, Maine after I'd been to the desert Southwest and to Oaxaca. And then I ended up back in Portland, Maine because I was just like drawn to that city many years ago. I thought it was a great place and let's go to Portland. And the first couple weeks that I was in Portland, I just bottomed out. I totally bottomed out. And that had been a common theme as I was transitioning different places, is that I would have a really hard transition there. And then I would just set my sights on the future. Okay, well, I only have 6 weeks in this place, and then I move to the next one, and it will be better. So I did that for nearly a year. But when I was in Portland, I had a really keen sense that it was not place dependent, not location dependent. It was me dependent. And so one morning in probably a stupor of crying, I pulled out a journal and I said, this is what I need to do. And I wrote a list of like, I don't know, 10 or 12 things that were so basic. Drink water. I wrote, get in water and touch your body every day. So meaning shower. But I also felt like I love to do cold water dips. So I thought that could be incorporated there too. Move my body, get in nature, really, really simple things. And I just kept going back to those and going back to those and going back to those because all this external stuff just was too much noise. So I found that the more I keep doing my list, my list of really simple things, pray, sing, dance, whatever those things may be and I think they're different for different people.
Well, it sounds like that list was very much like reminding you that you are a human being with particular needs that help you function as, in every other space, right? But these reminders of like, come back, you are living this experience. Don't forget, you're an emotional being with a human experience, if we want to quote Brene Brown. But that's what that
Yeah.
list sounds like to me, is just those reminders that, sure, they're helpful to like exist, but also they're just reminders to that everything is much bigger than this. But if you can come back to yourself and realize that you're a fully formed individual that's complex and needs, but still needs simple things, I think that's a good recommendation for people.
Yeah, the simplicity is what allows me to make intuitively clear decisions. So going to the next place, if I was cloudy and chaotic and anxious, it doesn't always work out real well.
Right. And especially too is that, if you're not kind of in tune, right, you might just pick a place because you feel that on paper it's better than the previous place, right? It's going to solve whatever was wrong there, when all along you probably needed to look inward to figure out what was causing the bottoming out. What was there, like a trend with that bottoming out?
Every time, it just seemed like every time I moved somewhere new, I was waiting on magic. I was waiting for like the
Whatever
next magical thing. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because this was not my first round with grief. My father died when I was 20 and he had been sick for a couple years. He had leukemia. And when that grief came into my world, it was very much like, let's drink, let's go to the bars, let's date a million boys, let's just like, and I was in college, I was young, 20 years old, which I think is a fairly common reaction for a 20-year-old.
Yeah. That's just hiding, right, from the grief process.
Yeah. Yeah, and then even after my divorce, which is a different type of life
Still grief.
shift that people have. Yeah, it's grief. It was let's work and achieve. And so I really just started working and achieving. And okay, so even in the structure of the life I created with Dave, and I didn't know this at the time, but it was very much like this is what I need to feel solid. It wasn't a let go. It was a build. Let's construct this life. Let's arrange the parts so that I have this family that like I have a ready-made family. I have a stepkid. I have a man and it's wonderful and all these parts go together nicely. But it was not maybe surrendering to what was for my greatest good.
Yeah, not to say that you weren't happy and you weren't in those
Yeah.
spaces, but it was a lot of it was on paper. These are the check marks that I need so that other people see. I'm making assumptions here, but so that other people see that I have this life, one that I didn't have before. But look, like I have the partner, there's a kid in my life. I'm doing fun vacations. I'm working. I'm living my purpose. But in all actuality, had this version of Erin lived in that version of your life, it'd probably be different, right?
Oh, it would never have worked. So that it during
That's
that life,
interesting.
that's why I went back to school to be an Ayurvedic health counselor. That's why I started the breathwork business. That's why I started doing keynotes that were not along those lines of my professional work because I was filling a hole.
So, do you think that this version of Erin and Dave would sync as well as the previous version of you?
I do, and here's why. The gift that man gave me was that he loved me in a way that I've like even my parents didn't love me that way. Nobody has ever loved me that way. He never understood what I was doing
Hmm.
and he supported it. He just loved me that much. And I hope that he felt the same way. I think it's a different sort of love that we don't always get. So it wasn't necessarily unconditional relationship at all. We both of us held each other's feet to the fire a lot. That was part of our relationship. However, the love he had and the support he gave and the willingness to get into the unknown. So this, like if you're in a partnership and this doesn't make sense, but I'm willing to work through it with you anyway. That he gave me. So I do think that I think it might be more challenging, but he always encouraged me. He saw more potential in me than I saw in myself mostly.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he saw this version of you and you
I
weren't
think
ready to
so.
see. I get it. It's hard to see these things like until like looking back, I'm sure you're like, well, why didn't I do this stuff sooner, right? And
Yeah.
so he probably saw this version of you, and even in those little pieces that you shared in the Mexican restaurant conversations, and like stop trying to fix everything was maybe his like, look, you need to lean into your purpose a little bit more,
Right. Right. And instead of being the mom and being the partner and being the one who keeps the
checking the
family
boxes.
going, yeah, do your thing.
So I mean,
Mhm.
I don't want to say these conversations are hard because I have these ideas of asking these questions that sound really insensitive, but I don't mean it in an insensitive way. Is there probably are pieces of that experience that you're grateful for. Is that true?
Uh, it is true. And it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same way.
Really hard to say because it feels disrespectful.
Correct. It's not. I don't think it is because I don't think Dave would think it
No.
is. I don't think my mom would think it is. I don't think the people that we're mentioning these moments about and being grateful for, not for the moment, but for what that moment created in us.
Yeah. And we all have those choices. It's how we all have that. You deal with loss, you deal with grief, you deal with whatever the catalyst is, and you can change your life. I think we all get that choice.
And I've talked to a couple people about this too, and I'm interested in your perspective. Is we were kind of all forced into time with ourselves during the pandemic, right? A lot of us were forced to just like slow down, stop doing things. And other people on the show have called it, kind of a great reset, a great awakening. For myself, I've taken the time to realize what's important to me versus like, what was I just doing, checking
Yeah.
boxes, right? Do you feel the same way about this global experience that we're all having?
I do, and I will tell you, I feel like the pandemic offered Dave and I a beautiful chance to connect before he died in a way that we would have never done before. We spent many months. So he died in December of 2020. So we had several months of the pandemic that we were just together. And he and I both tend to be very active, busy people. And we did a lot of things together, but we did things separately too. But we couldn't, we were stuck there together. And it was great. And we just connected in a way that was a true gift. So I'm grateful for the pandemic in that regard, because I really do believe connection is one of our greatest gifts in this world. So in my mind now, this new construct that I'm operating under, I've found that I have to get stable or create some internal stability. So in the beginning, I thought that would look like, oh, get an apartment, get a job, do this, do that. But it really boiled down to like the internal stability in me. And then pleasure and joy seem to come in when I'm a little bit more stable. But then there was like this missing piece that I've recently like re-engaged with the world.
Hmm.
And I think that connection is part of it. But if you aren't internally clear, internally settled, it's really difficult to connect on a meaningful level.
Yeah, I love that. Part of me thinks of it or a connection to the idea of therapy, in which someone that is struggling or whatever will not get value from therapy unless they're ready, which is that like total understanding of like, whoa, I'm in a space that needs this, right? So part of that connects to me because, for years I didn't do it and then I did it, but I didn't do it until I was ready for it. And it makes that
Right.
connection and therefore opened up those other doors. So I can relate to it in a sense of that. It's just like self-awareness of like where you are, whatever that is, if it's good, bad, indifferent, having that understanding allows for so much more authentic experiences. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. Mm-hmm.
So you're now a year and a half out from this moment where Erin had to let go. And you're creating this life that you don't necessarily know what it looks like 6 months, a year from now. And that's okay with this version of Erin. Is that true? Like you're just kind of,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it is
it's so
okay. And
beautiful.
I think, I'm a little more settled. I'm going to live in Portland, Maine for a while because that feels really good. But no, I have no idea. And I am okay with it. I think that's the best I have to offer myself at this moment. Can I lighten things up just a little bit and tell
Yes,
you a funny
please
story?
tell me.
Okay, so yesterday I went and watched Top Gun, the new Top Gun
The new
movie.
one.
Have you seen it?
I have not. And here's people will shame me for this. I haven't seen the original either. And my thought on this, right. I know. And I'm a kid of the 80s, so I should have seen it. However,
Yeah.
I have a problem watching movies from like earlier time periods now. Because if you don't have that nostalgia, like think about
Yeah.
that original Terminator movie. If you were to,
Yeah.
that movie was epic. Like as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. If you watch that for the first time now, you'd be like, what is this? So anyway, no, I haven't seen the new Top Gun, nor
Okay.
have I seen the original, but I do intend on seeing at least the new one.
Yeah. So I think you can watch the new one. Can I give a little bit of a spoiler?
Sure. By
It
the
won't
time this
spoil the
comes
whole thing.
out, it's fine.
Okay. So there's one scene in the movie where Val Kilmer, I think that's the actor's name, he plays Iceman, and Maverick, Tom Cruise, are meeting up. And, they're older men and they're having a a discussion about what's going on and about Maverick's new what the journey he's on. And so Iceman can't speak, so he's typing things. And he types on his computer screen, it's time to let go.
Hmm.
And so I watched that last night and I thought, oh my gosh, everyone needs to know this. It's such a common theme. It's such a common theme. I think our capability to let go is directly proportional to our happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, especially for controlling individuals, and understanding that a lot of this is out of our control, whether we want to believe that or not. Yeah, a friend of mine that may or may not be on this podcast at some point has a song. He's a musician and a Tony winner, but has a song called "Let It Go." And for me, in my moments of like darkness, listening to that song reminded me that there's only so much that I can control. And if I let go of most of it, that's not, like super close to the heart, I can get through it. And tomorrow the sun will come out. I'm not going to quote Annie here, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, honestly, when we first started communicating, you said that your shift was really Dave dying. But having the conversation, sure, it was triggered by Dave dying, but really I think your life shift is that letting go moment, standing behind that couch, watching kind of the world happen as it is and going, things are going to happen whether I choose for them to or not, right? Do you,
Right.
yeah.
Oh, I think that's totally it. I think it's
Yeah.
100% that was the life shift of when I made the choice to let go. And interestingly, just my personality and who I am, how I'm wired, how my nervous system is wired as that controlling type person, I had to be taken out. It wouldn't have happened in any other like mild kind of way. It just wouldn't work for me.
And you probably had Dave lived, you probably wouldn't have listened to his, you need to stop fixing or stop trying to fix things.
Never. I thought he was ridiculous. Yeah.
And it's like, what I love about your story is how vivid that that day of, and all the things that happened that day are for you. Because, I don't think a lot of people have that opportunity, especially in a moment of deep despair and your life essentially crumbling, right? In a
Yeah.
moment, to remember like these really like impactful conversations that
Yeah.
probably are like little like reminders in your
Yeah.
day to day now.
They are. And luckily I had enough wherewithal in the beginning to just start writing. And
That
I wrote
helps.
it all down. I just wrote and wrote and wrote. I wrote it all down.
Yeah, even though he told you, you don't write, don't lock
No.
yourself in the
So
house.
this is so early in our relationship, he had I was at his home staying. He had to work one day and his refrigerator broke down, and I decided while he was at work I was going to help him I would clean it out so that he could just, move it out and get a new refrigerator. And then his mother stopped by. So I ended up cleaning out the refrigerator with this woman that I barely knew, like his 70 some year old mom. It was like a whole ordeal. And he got home and I was like sweaty, and that's just disgust. Like nobody wants to clean out a refrigerator,
Yeah,
right?
no.
That's not a fun job. And so I said, you have to take me to dinner. Like, I'm going to go shower and I got to get out of this house. You have to take me to dinner. And we get in the car and I looked at him and I said, you know what? I must really like you because I am a dreamer and a writer. I don't do things like this. And I will never forget his face. He just looked at me like, what? And he's okay. Well,
Okay.
you're a dreamer and a writer.
And you still are,
Uh, yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. In the most beautiful way possible.
Right. And now you can really do it the way that makes the most sense for your heart moving forward.
Yeah.
That's great. So I like to end these conversations with questions that are unanswerable, or a question that is unanswerable so far. But if you could go back and talk to day after Erin, is there anything that you would say to her?
Be patient with yourself in the process.
Yeah.
Just be patient.
And whatever you're doing at any moment is okay.
Yeah. 100%.
And that response, especially for people that I've talked to about grief, is very similar. Is that things will happen in whatever time table they happen in.
They do, and we can't control it, unfortunately.
Let go.
Let go.
Let go. Trust the process. My biggest advice always in any kind of grief situation, having my own experiences, is really what worked for me is honoring how I felt at any particular moment. Mm-hmm. That even now, if I'm having a bad day, I acknowledge that. I let myself have that bad day, right? I don't try to manipulate whatever my body is needing to do or feeling at that moment in time. But what helps me is just acknowledging that it's there, it's going to happen, and that it's not forever. It's just part of being this, emotional
None
being.
of it's permanent. None of it's permanent. The timeline's not permanent. The emotions, the thoughts, none of it. None of it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your journey, because I think hearing how people process really devastating moments like this and what they can create out of it, and the fact that you are finding new spaces to exist in, whether that's physical or, kind of emotionally, or however that may be, is really inspiring for people. That, it doesn't all end when it seems like it's all ending.
Right. That's my intention. That's the intention of me doing any of this, is to let people know there is light at the end of the tunnel, even when it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. And I think that's so much of grief, is that we just, in these moments, it's like, how does life go on? Is it possible?
Yeah.
And it is.
It is.
And just like we said earlier, it's really hard to say, but eventually, hopefully, everyone will get to a moment in which they're grateful for the moment that changed them.
Yeah. I think so. I couldn't have said that 6 months ago.
No. Oh, I hate saying it, but it's so true. And I've said it before on this podcast. People will be like, if you could go back in time and change XYZ. And I'm like, no, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be who I am and what I'm doing and where I am and the people I know. Everything that I have now is a product of that moment, that shift in my trajectory of whatever that may be. Sure, it'd be interesting to see what life would be like, like that movie Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like, if this one thing didn't go that way, what does that multiverse look like for Matt?
Right.
But I don't want to change it. I like this movie that I'm a part of right now.
Me too. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you for being a part of this podcast, and I hope that the people listening can connect with what you're doing and what you're sharing. We'll share a little bit more about your next steps in the show notes. So if anyone's interested, take a look at those and connect with Erin.
Thank you, Matt.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.